Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools and much more.
Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast for sustainable procurement. I'm Sean McCarthy, Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company, and I'm delighted to welcome today two people, John Whitlow and Harriet Wallace from Imperial College. Welcome, John and Harriet. John, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sean. My name is John Whitlow. I'm Director of Financial Services and Procurement for Imperial College. We are a very large higher education institution in the UK and have only just achieved second best global university today. That was announced. In terms of my background, I suppose I'm a seasoned practitioner in procurement, have been for over 40 years, and I've worked for various organisations, principally around the UK, but I have been at Imperial for the last 20 years or more. So I know Imperial inside out, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today to tell you a little bit more about our approach to sustainable procurement.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, John. So did you just say that Imperial has been announced today, the world's second university?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, we've achieved second in the globe, which is a brilliant result for Imperial. That puts us in front of our colleague across the university sector here in the UK. So we're all very proud of that particular achievement.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. It's actually great to talk to somebody who's been in procurement, I think possibly even longer than me. So yeah, congratulations on such a long and illustrious career. Harriet, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. And Sean, thank you for inviting us to come and join the podcast today. We've been working with Action Sustainability on our procurement policies, so it's great to be working with your community interest arm as well. So I'm relatively new to Imperial. I've been at Imperial 18 months. And before that, spent many years working in the civil service, where I've worked on environmental policy and international policy and all sorts of other areas. And way back before that, I worked in the sustainability team at Unilever, working on how they made their sustainability and social responsibility work more visible to their consumers. So I'm the sustainability director at Imperial, and my job is to make our sustainability strategy happen in reality across the organisation.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's you coming from your background. It's a lot of best practice in there as well, isn't there? It's quite interesting to understand. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about Imperial and a little bit about your sustainability objectives and where you see it going?
Sure. Imperial is really determined to be a sector leader in sustainability, and we've got a sustainability strategy already that runs from 2021 to 26, but also in our new Imperial strategy that was published just this spring, it's called Science for Humanity. There's a really big commitment to set a global benchmark for university sustainability, and that goes across how we run our own campuses and our research and what we teach our graduates. So we want to equip our graduates to understand the climate science and also be equipped to do things about it. Within all of that, as the strategy sets out, we've committed to make some really big investments to transform our campuses and our working practices. And that's both about cleaning up campus energy so that we're not running on gas anymore, as many universities and other organisations are, but it's also about our Scope 3 emissions. And that's where procurement comes in.
Thanks. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about Scope 3 and how much progress you've made and where you see the hotspots in your Scope 3 emissions?
Sure, happy to do that. I mean, we've just, in the last year, we've done a really deep dive into our Scope 3 footprint. So previously, we've had a total number for Scope 3, but we haven't had a breakdown. And we take a similar approach to most people in the higher education sector, which is to use a spend-based methodology. And that takes how much we spend on different kinds of things and then multiplies it by an emissions factor, which gives a sense of how much carbon that translates into. And it gives an indicative sense of where the bigger and smaller areas are. So we've just published actually 2 weeks ago our breakdown of our Scope 3 emissions for the first time. It's all on our website if people are interested, including the technical detail for those of us who love the technical detail. And what that shows is that in our scope 3, it is roughly half travel and half procurement of goods and other services. The travel includes both our staff business travel and daily commuting, which is quite small for us because we're lucky enough to be on good public transport connections. And then also the home to university commuting for our students. And because we've got a large international population, there's a lot of air travel there, as there would be for any university with a big international population, and that's pretty carbon intensive. So half of our scope 3 is on travel. We've just put out a sustainable travel policy on the business travel bit, but that's a separate conversation. And half of it is procurement. And that's why the sustainable procurement piece for us is really, really important. Within the procurement emissions, we've done a breakdown by types of spend. The biggest for us is ICT, and that isn't just buying kit, it's a lot of heavy use of software and data processing, data centres. Imperial is a STEM-B university. We do a lot of advanced mathematics, we're developing AI, and those are energy intensive areas, although lots of hard work is happening to try and reduce the energy intensity. So that's the biggest chunk for us. And then after that, it's laboratories. Laboratories have a lot of kit, but actually it's the consumables. We have a big life medical sciences speciality, and there are a lot of gloves and pipette tips and reagents, and all of those things add up to quite a big footprint. And then after that, the next two are business services and estates. So now we've got that breakdown, I think it gives us a really good guide on where we need to start if we want to try and reduce that footprint.
So we'll bring John in a moment, obviously, to talk about the how that kind of segues through into the supply chain. But if I was to look at sustainable procurement for you, is it just about carbon, or do you consider other aspects as well?
We're starting with carbon because the methodologies are more straightforward there.
Yeah.
We would love to get a richer view, and in the procurement policy, which we'll say more about it, we are looking at other things, and we do have good policies already on things like modern slavery and so forth. Carbon's the big focus for now. We are exploring whether we can assess biodiversity in our supply chain, and we do have some academic collaborators who know how to do that. So I'm hopeful we will be able to get there, but we don't have a good way to do that yet. So we're being very practical and starting with the things that we think we can do a good assessment of. And also, when you look at the climate science, the issues around carbon are very, very pressing and urgent. Imperial is a university that has all sorts of leading climate scientists. It's the home of the chair of the International Panel on Climate Change, Jim Skier, who's just been elected to that role, and it's the home of a number of leading climate scientists. And so I think we feel that we've got to really lean into climate at the moment.
Yeah, and that's interesting because different organisations obviously are driven differently towards sustainability and towards sustainability priorities. So what you're saying is because of who you are and what you do and your position in the world around climate science, you've really got to walk the walk, as it were, not only in your own operation but through your supply chain. So, John, how does that filter through into procurement? Tell us a little more about procurement, particularly in the academic higher education world, and what are the challenges around sustainability for you?
Of course, happy to do that, Sean. So obviously, as Harry has highlighted, we are focusing a lot of our effort on carbon and how we can impact that whole area. We obviously have a very diverse supply chain across the university, given all of the disciplines that we specialise in as a STEM university. Obviously, most of our disciplines are sort of science-based. So we have very good sort of data, but we're enriching it all the time. And what we decided to do is look at those key supply areas where we can really sort of make a difference, and we can work much more closely with our supply chain partners as we see them. Obviously, they're essential to the continued success of Imperial. So working with the very best suppliers around the globe, invariably, because we do buy fairly specialized things as highlighted, but we also buy mainstream services and items where we can play our role in terms of influencing the supply chain to work with us to diminish and reduce our carbon footprint. So the way we're going about doing that is very much identifying all of the key stakeholders across the university to see how they can work with us in a collaborative manner to influence those early thoughts about what people might need to buy in the future, what they need to buy right now. What alternative options do we have? We've obviously got a long list of options from not buying right through to the decision around if we do need to buy, then who are we going to buy from and what types of credentials are we going to need to establish from our supply chain partners, and making sure then that we've got good people spread around the university who can help us achieve those objectives. We have a category team within the university, which is not uncommon across many organisations, who can specialise and do specialise in specific areas. And those category team leaders will have intimate knowledge of their supply chain areas and can work closely with our colleagues across the university to ensure that we have a successful impact in this whole area. I recognise that's not without challenge. People can often be very focused on what they need to buy and who they need to trade with. And there's also a massive behavioural piece behind all of this work. And it means that we've got to make sure that people are, aware of our approach, the benefits of that approach, how we can sort of derive true benefit from the procurement approach that we're now adopting. So that means we've got to work with a large array of different people across the organisation who obviously want to achieve fantastic things in the work that they're doing, whether it's research activity focused or whether it's teaching. But nonetheless, we need to play a much more important role in the future in working even more closely with our colleagues to achieve those objectives.
So certainly from my relatively limited experience of working with the higher education sector, senior academics are notoriously difficult to herd. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you've managed to because I think everybody in every organisation has issues with stakeholder engagement, but I suspect those are amplified by the really important work that these people are doing and the priorities around that work. Can you tell us a little more about how you've done that? And also, I'm interested in I'm asking multiple questions now, which I probably shouldn't. In your procurement organisation, you say you have category teams and category leads. Is that a central team? Do they report to you, or are they more located out in the business?
With respect to the category teams, yes, we have people who are based in our central team and specialise in particular areas, but they also work with a number of people out in the key departments of the college, both academic departments and central departments, and with our faculties to ensure that we've got that work sort of evenly spread. We can only spread ourselves so far, so we do need cooperation and involvement of a much wider number of people beyond the corporate team. So making sure those channels of communication and working collaboratively remain open. That's something that I've personally spent a lot of time on over my years at Imperial in developing those relationships. But we do have a churn of people across the university, obviously, particularly within our academic departments. People invariably work here for a long time, or they come to do a particular piece of research and they move on to another organisation. So you've got to be very mindful of making sure you're engaging with those academics, particularly who are well established and respected across the organisation. And when they obviously support you and help you, then that's when you invariably get things done. So you have to be quite nimble and be prepared to spend time with colleagues across the university to cajole them, influence them, because often when we receive funding from different parts of either the public sector or private sector, then the specific things that those research applications and grants demand some limitations over what you can do and what you can't do. But if you are talking to your academic colleagues at application stage or as early as you can, then you can make a big difference in influencing some of the supply chain decisions that you need to make. But I do recognise that on occasions we have got very limited choices in who we work with. So the role we play in working with those suppliers and influencing those suppliers, either by ourselves or in collaboration with other universities, for example, who may be partners of us, or they can in turn help us with influencing those supply chain areas are fairly key. So that does remain a challenge within any large complex organization where much of your work is based on a limited timescale and it's project focused, research focused. So you do have to be aware of those challenges, and my team are certainly aware of that. And I know that our colleagues who are helping us with this key work across the organisation are also important stakeholders for us to sort of develop further. And that's something we'll talk about in due course, how we're developing those people in terms of training and awareness, so that they can act as our champions across the university as well.
It's interesting that you mentioned the role of funders, and I mean, obviously that this happens in all walks of life. In the private sector, it tends to be investors and institutional investors that are driving the sustainability agenda or not. And in the public sector, it's very much about public policy. But in your area, you're kind of, well, as in the HE sector, it's quite unique because presumably you have a whole spectrum of different funders for different types of work. Are you seeing demands for sustainability from the people with the money, or are they much more focused on their specific research objectives?
Sean, we are seeing demands for sustainability from funders, and actually Imperial's just become an early signatory to the Concordat for the Environmental Sustainability of Research and Innovation, which was published recently by Wellcome Trust and developed along with other funders and various institutions in the sector. So funders are in different places, some are more advanced on this than others, but they are all looking at this, and that Concordat sets out an ask of the sector to reduce our environmental impact as far as we can, including on procurement, and know that the funders are also looking at their own carbon footprints. Of course, if you're a funder, all of the research organisations you fund are your scope 3, and it's massively larger than any of their own operational emissions. So if the funders are going to reduce their carbon footprint, they need all of us to do the same, which means we need our suppliers to work with us. So it's a cascade of footprint reduction, which we're all going to have to pull together on. And what's interesting is, some of our suppliers are, very forward thinking on this, and others are very much at the beginning of their journey. Some are really small and don't necessarily have specialists in-house. So, there's a wide range of positions on this. But what I am seeing with the Concordat and the conversations in the sector is a real enthusiasm and willingness to move forward on this at pace, and driven often by the passion of our academics, actually, because they see what the science is telling us, and they want to be proud of the organisations where they work on these issues in terms of what we do at home as well as what we encourage everybody else to do.
This is interesting, actually, and a really good point that you are your funders' scope 3. Pretty much entirely, because the funding bodies don't tend to have big carbon emissions usually. Do you see either now or in the future, because obviously you're in competition for funding, and you're often bidding against other universities, would you see your carbon footprint being part of an evaluation for funding now or in the future?
That's a great question. So far, I haven't seen asks about carbon footprint, but I have seen a number of funders starting to ask what are the plans within a research proposal to minimise environmental impact and be as sustainable as possible. So that is starting to come through. We do get asked by the NHS for our carbon reduction plan because we are a supplier to the NHS. We've got medical school. So one of the funders, Cancer Research UK, has already said that by January 2026, they won't fund any organisation that hasn't signed up to the Concordat and hasn't adopted the LEAF framework or a similar lab sustainability framework. And the reason that's relevant, particularly LEAF, is that it's very much focused on life sciences and medical sciences, and those are some of the most carbon intensive areas of research because they have to have very steady environmental conditions in the buildings, and they have a lot of consumables because of risks of contamination. So, CR UK is the first, but I would not be at all surprised if many funders follow suit and start to make some of these things a baseline minimum condition for funding.
Interesting. It's coming, isn't it? So you mentioned the I don't know whether this is one for you, Harriet, or for John, about the reaction of the suppliers and suppliers being on various different stages of their journey, and also the need for upskilling. I guess that's amongst your own team and also amongst your supply chain. Would you like to talk a little about that?
Shall I make a beginning on that, and then John may want to add? I mean, we're just at the beginning of our supplier engagement on this, right? So we will learn more as we go on. But we know that some of our suppliers are thinking about this really hard. So, for example, some of the IT suppliers are thinking really hard about the environmental impact of data centres and the source of energy. We also know that some of our suppliers, especially the smaller ones, haven't got so far yet, and they can't necessarily tell us what the environmental impact of their products and services is yet. So this is part of the conversation we're going to need to have with them, and also to work out other areas where some of our own expertise, we've got experts in life cycle analysis, might be able to come in support of our suppliers as they seek to build their skills and understanding. That's all to be worked through, but from what I've seen so far, it varies a lot. I mean, John, you may have thoughts as well.
No, I agree. I think we're dealing with suppliers at both ends of the spectrum, really. We'll be dealing with some very sophisticated suppliers, given the nature of what we're buying from them. And no doubt they'll be able to even help us with some of our sort of thinking and approach to suppliers who may be more local in nature. They may well not have so advanced practices in place. And that's where we think we can really help to sort of develop our local piece as well. How can we work with our local supply chain to, improve, enhance? And it's obviously one of our commitments to, I suppose, how we're going to sort of develop local supply chains and address the sort of global to local types of issues. So we are, part of our strategy is very much about community engagement and how we engage more closely, and that obviously will involve our supply chain as well. And we're doing some early work with, for example, a number of West London universities to try and collaborate more closely with them. And we're talking to a number of those institutions at present on their footprint with regard to business travel, which is not dissimilar to ourselves, and how we can make an impact in those types of areas. So early shoots at the moment, but Harriet's right. This is where we think we can certainly support some of our supply chain partners with real tangible information and guidance, and signaling where's the best place to get some of the information if we're unable to provide it directly ourselves. So that's our general sort of approach.
Yeah, I think it's really important because I've always said, if you're asking your supply chain to do something new, you can't just dump it on them and say get on with it, because obviously some suppliers have that capability but others don't. And I mean, Imperial College is a big estate, isn't it? So there must be an awful lot of supply chain in there around the estate management, the cleaning, the maintenance, transportation, etc., where presumably local supply could be a big benefit to you.
Yeah, certainly that's the case at Imperial. We obviously are always trying to ensure that we get good value for money, and how we, when looking at our procurement strategies, can we split business more easily? How can we develop some of those linkages to some of our local supply chain partners? And I know our construction team have worked very closely looking at the different tiers of supply, and recruiting local companies or local people is really, really key to us, and helping to develop that local supply chain is important to us as well. I think we've got a lot of work to do still in that area, but the threads of it are there, and obviously we need to do more. So we are sharing not only our procurement spend information with these other West London institutions, but I'm sure we can then also look to share our Scope 3 data and some of the things we're doing specifically within Imperial to really drive change across West London itself. So, but that's an early stage piece of work, but I'm hoping it will it will show sort of significant benefits for all the parties involved, including our local supply chain.
Yeah. Do you work with purchasing consortia? I know I'm asking because over many years we've worked with the London University's Purchasing Consortium on sustainable procurement. Do you look at that sort of collaboration and put demands on them around sustainability?
Yes, we do. So we've had association with the London University's Purchasing Consortium, who you know, Sean. We are currently members of the Southern University's Purchasing Consortium, and that's made up of obviously lots of universities, particularly the larger ones across the southeast of England, and the consortia themselves obviously collaborate closely across the different geographies. So yeah, making sure that sustainability of procurement is built into whatever the consortia do on our behalf is key, and we always make sure that they're sort of adopting leading practice, and I think they need the support of the institutions that are members of the consortia to help them with that approach. We've done some preliminary work, had some preliminary discussions with the SUPC about how they measure carbon, for instance. So that work's developing, and we've got some further work to do. They are probably at fairly early stages as well, aren't they, Harry, in terms of some of the discussions that we've had with them so far. But yes, consortia purchasing is a common theme across the public sector generally, and obviously sustainability will become an increasingly important part of that whole agenda for us moving forward.
John and Harriet, thanks very much for your insights into the world of sustainable procurement in the higher education sector. This is episode 1 of 2, and we look forward to episode 2, where John and Harriet will be talking about Scope 3 emissions. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.